Now, have great pleasure in introducing Duncan Chessell, adventurer, geologist and company director. I've just got a little bit off on Duncan's website up there, but I'd just like to say a few things about Duncan. He's described on his website as a modern-day adventurer who lives for the next challenge. Duncan was born in 1970 and educated at Adelaide Uni, gained a Bachelor of Science majoring in geology, so rocks are obviously his love, or sediments, or whatever. Duncan's been climbing since 1988. He's still trying to get there. Sorry, Duncan. We do that to the younger people who come into our midst. First on the crags and gorges of the Australian national parks, and then on snowy hills all around the globe. From this beginning, Duncan is now the director of 3 companies specialising in trekking around the globe. They are Chessell Adventures, PNG Expedition Limited and Arun Treks. They run treks worldwide, including Kokoda Track, Mount Kilimanjaro, and to the Everest base camp in Nepal and Tibet. On the adventurer front, it's nice to hear about his businesses, but really we want to, as geography, as loving exploration, the word explore needs to be in there. And those who listened to Dr. Rita Gardner on Monday would have been inspired by that sense of adventure and exploration she brought to her talk. Duncan's climbed Everest 3 times, 2001, 2007, 2010, and he actually is the only South Australian, he is a South Australian, and the only Australian to have climbed the world's highest peak 3 times. Under Duncan's leadership in 2007, 15 of 19 climbers reached the summit of Mount Everest with fortunately no loss of life or frostbite. The most successful Australian Everest expedition ever. He also climbed the 7th of the 7 summits on the 1st of January 2007, leading the Centre Antarctic Challenge expedition of 4 climbers. A journey of some 400 kilometres across the Ellsworth mountain range there. They pioneered the first ever climb from sea level to the highest point in Antarctica, Mount Vinson. Duncan is one of an elite group of expedition leaders worldwide to have led expedition to all 7 summits. Awesome. Duncan's input to the conference is very relevant to Australian curriculum, geography, shape paper, which states that, and for those who haven't seen this shape paper, we fought very, very hard that this is aim number 1. And I'll read it to you. Our aim as geography teachers is to develop a sense of wonder, curiosity, knowledge and interest about the variety of environments, people, cultures and places that exist throughout the world. It is through such a geographical lens that Duncan has embarked on his adventures and is today here to share with us his sense of wonder, exhilaration and thoughts on being an adventurer. So I'll hand over to Duncan now.
I still had a bit of an appointment with Mount Everest, so I've got a little bit of a story about Mount Everest. And I went back in 2007 and led a trip and we had 15 out of 19 summit the mountain. And I suppose for me it was more about having a good expedition, that everyone was safe and so on. A couple of people on the trip didn't summit who were friends of mine, Katie Sarah from Adelaide and Rob North from the Antarctic expedition. He didn't summit. So I sort of still had to go back again. Well, that was my excuse. And that was 2010. I went back again, and Katie Sarah and Rob North and Zach Zaharias, another person who was involved in the 2001 trip, came back on the expedition. And I decided to throw in a little bit of a twist. I thought I'd try something actually, probably the most dangerous thing I ever did, was I decided to do a sea to summit on Mount Everest. And so I got a plane ticket to Calcutta, because I figured that was pretty close to the ocean. And I got my bike and I jumped in a taxi with this guy called Krishna. It was a bit of a mistake, almost. Krishna and many of the taxi drivers in this country, India, are protected not by seatbelts or anything else, but they have these glowing statues of gods on the dashboard. And often they would all glow at once when it was very dangerous, and other times they'd go dull when it seemed okay. But we drove for about, I said, I want to go to the beach, I want waves, Down in the bottom of West Bengal, there's a nice part of the coast just south of Calcutta. And so I wanted to actually touch the water and start my trip across India. And we drove for about 3 hours, flat out, We screeched around the place, and I said, I'm not actually in any hurry. You don't need to drive this fast. He said, oh, it's fine. So anyway, everyone else was doing that too. And the worst thing about it was not that we almost died 6 or 7 times on that journey, was that I was about to ride a bicycle along this highway that this guy and all his friends were driving on. And yeah, anyway. So rode across India, as you do. It was a bit warm, up to 45 degrees on one occasion. It was a very hot day, that one. But got across Nepal, and then up over the Himalayas, quite a bit of a hill climb, and then onto the Tibetan plateau, onto this nice road that the Chinese had made across Tibet, which was an absolute relief. There was no traffic. They all stayed to the cars and trucks that were there, stayed to the right side of the road, and no one tried to run you over. So that was quite good. Got to base camp after a bit of a cycle leg, and it was good fitness for climbing Mount Everest. So Katie Sarah, my co-leader of the trip, came in from Beijing much more wisely with the group. All up, we had about 50 Westerners on the expedition and about 35 local Nepalese and Tibetan staff involved in the trip. So Katie caught the train from Beijing to Lhasa and then drove to base camp, a much more sensible way to go rather than 1500k slog across India, Nepal and Tibet. And we met up there. We had a doctor for our base camp and an advanced base camp. We climbed lower on the mountain, but helped with radio communications, and there was a lot of people for her to look after as well. She was a very experienced doctor. Set up a great little internet cafe at 6,500 metres at advanced base camp so that we could download the weather forecasts from Meteotest in Switzerland. And they did a lot of aviation forecasting around the world and for some airlines. And so they were able to give us some pretty precise data in terms of wind speed, direction, humidity, by altitude. And we could get those charts, and they were pretty good for about 48 hours. And they gave us a 7-day, which was a bit rubbishy, but 2 or 3 days out, we had a pretty clear idea of what we were facing. And the trick was to basically, I guess, get everyone acclimatised and well provisioned, and up and down the mountain, climbing up and down to 7,500 metres, bring them back down to base camp after about a month, resting at base camp in a really nice, base camp setup and tent. Get really well fed up and a lot of sleep, and then as soon as the weather forecast looks good, we head back up the mountain, which would take about 5 or 6 days to get to the summit, and then a couple of days to get back down again. So overall, about 2 months for the trip for most people, if everything went well. But for me and the Sherpas who had set the whole trip up, it began in October of the previous year, ordering the oxygen bottles, ordering the extra tents. We used 170 four-season tents, for the different people, the different camps. We had just so many truckloads of gear. It was incredible. A few spreadsheets were involved, and quite a bit of food and purchasing. And the main thing that went really well with this trip was that we sat down with all the Sherpas in Kathmandu. We said, "Okay, guys, we've put it in the brochure: blue sky, summit on Mount Everest. So we've got to try and deliver the brochure shot. All right, can't be too cloudy. We want as many people at the top as possible. Everybody's safe. This is the shot we're after." So we sat down with the Sherpas. Some of them had climbed it 10 times before. 5 or 6 was sort of the norm for most of our team. And I've been working with these guys for probably about 12 years at this point. So I knew a lot of them really well, knew their families quite well. So we got really well prepared and said, how many bottles of oxygen do we need at high camp? How many emergency bottles do we need at the next camp down? How many tents? How many sleeping bags? So every Sherpa in the team knew the final plan. We weren't just saying, here you go, carry this 30-kilo load up there and come back tomorrow, and then I'll give you something else to do. They knew what needed to be done, and everyone was reading off the same page, which really meant the expedition went without a hitch, basically. Despite that, there was another guy we met at base camp. He was from Holland, so another mountaineering Mecca. He was a bit of an expert, obviously. He decided he could climb Mount Everest in a pair of shorts. And so he's standing there at base camp one morning, juggling, I thought he was half New Zealander or something. He was doing like the haka and juggling and looking up at the mountain. And we went over and talked to him and said, yeah, I can control my core temperature with my mind. And I'm going to stay warm, and I'm going to climb Mount Everest, and then I'm going to go home. It's like, okay. Well, I mean, he was doing the right things. He could vision himself to the summit. He wasn't saying, I can't do it, all that sort of stuff. He was pretty annoyed with us though, because we pointed out that in his press releases, he said he was going to climb in just a pair of shorts and boots and crampons, obviously. It didn't say anything about a headband. And so we said, you're not allowed to wear the headband. And he took it off and was a bit disappointed and had cold ears from then on. But he ended up not making it to the top of the mountain. And a number of other people were also carried off the peak, some of them on oxygen, in not very good state of repair. So it's quite an extreme mountain to challenge without clothes. It's minus 25. Minus 25, yeah, and it can be, you can reasonably expect on a bad weather day you might get 180 to 120 kilometre-hour winds is quite normal for the summit. We were hoping for something between about 5 and 20 knots was sort of our parameters that we would, or 5 to 15 is what we wanted, 20 would be an outside really. After that, the wind chill factor would probably make it a bit too risky. You'd make one mistake with a glove and you'd lose your whole hand. So we were looking for the gap between when the monsoon was starting to push up and the jet stream winds had shifted slightly to the north into Tibet a bit further, but the monsoon hadn't quite pushed over the range and started to dump masses of snow onto our route. So the ropes were still in place. And that would happen about the end of May, sometime in the end of May. And that was really what we were timing everything for. We'd set up the mountain with all the various camps, 3 main camps above that, all stocked. But obviously we still had to do the hard work of actually acclimatising and just trying to climb at this altitude is incredible.